So I guess my overall thoughts on this are like if we're a society which is supposed to be in theory, not discriminating against people who are of different racial groups or of different religious ideas or what have you. I mean, why is it that I mean, even in public schools, I mean, this very same video article has a link to a video about which in one mom even talks about it talks about one mom who has a high functioning autistic kid who's still fighting a real bad struggle to even keep her high functioning autistic kid in the normal classroom with other kids. And, it's the same problem. Like, other kids and other parents are discriminating against these Asperger's kids as if we're trying to segregate them. But we know what happened with segregation. I mean, you put someone in a different class, as if they're segregation, they're going to get less materials to be able to work with things. Now, on the other hand, if you put them in the same classes, but you give them the necessary amendments to the materials, like extra time on exams or what other tools they need to help work, they perform just as well as other students on the bracket. They perform just as well as other students, in their class. So, if anything, I mean, I think that, it's the same problem here. I mean, they're having trouble trying to keep, even high-functioning autistics in the mainstream classroom. They're trying to segregate where they're trying to segregate now where these autistics can worship, again, because of their danger to other people. I mean, I understand a problem with urinating in church, but I mean, come on. I mean, if you're not urinating on other people, it's not a danger. It's uncomfortable, it's bloody obscene, but it's not a danger. It's obscene, by standard definition of the word, but, I mean, hell, in my case, I'd view it as funny because of the fact that it's like slapstick comedy, but, or it's something because it's so socially inappropriate, it's funny for me. Just cringing to see everyone else's uncomfort, but, it's not a danger. And when I say this, I'm not laughing at my fellow autistic, I'm laughing at the fucking idiocy of the neurotypicals who promptly become uncomfortable with this. I mean, but the whole point is that this issue is, I know I'm making a really major comparison here, but in terms of technicals, in terms of the technical details, I mean, it's the exact same sort of thing of certain types of segregation. Here's another example of this. When they talk about, and I mean, granted, yes, somebody who may be threatening other people is a danger, and then yes, there should be amendments for this particular kid out on race to prevent him from hitting other kids. I mean, that's legit. But, I mean, that whole thing about him urinating or making loud noises in public being a danger to other people based on that is like saying what used to be said back during the 1920s and 30s, that black people and white people could not drink from the same drinking fountain because black people would transmit syphilis to white people through that. And I mean, the science was even known at the time that syphilis was an STD. I mean, like, yeah, if you watch the film The Band Played On, which is based on a true story, it references other materials in relation to this. This was a stereotype going on widely down through the South, amongst all the other pseudoscientific bullshit that was used to keep blacks and whites segregated from each other in the school systems, in universities, in churches. I mean, blacks never worshipped at a white church. If they did, they were. If they went over there, they were at the very least yelled at until they left. At worst case scenarios, they were lynched. I mean, you'll forgive me for being a little bit of a slippery slope scenario here, but I mean, okay, here's another example of something that you'll find often. A lot of people will hear. Have you ever heard the expression where somebody will say like, "Oh, so and so's an idiot or really retarded. They shouldn't have kids." Or that maybe that maybe these people who are so retarded based on one reason or another should kill themselves or something like that. Well, I mean, that whole sterilization project is the exact same reason why they lynched black people in the first place, was to prevent them from reproducing. It was to take them out of the gene pool. It's the same basic thing. And or they advocated that with Jews with the Holocaust. I mean, the only difference was in those cases they physically did it. But this mentality is left over in some cases for a lot of people with disabilities. Now. Now, for people who genuinely are, okay, let me put it this way: for people who are genuinely, for people who are genuinely acting idiotic, yes, there is a danger of them teaching idiotic thought patterns to their kids, which means that I would recommend, again, injecting logic in to prevent such transfer from happening. But, I'm not one to suggest eugenics or anything here. I mean. Now, Asian majority, yes, Asian majority voting in the system, quadratic equations, yes, I can understand that. Restraining idiocy from from being able to influence major events of a country, I can understand that, or ill-informedness. I mean, I can understand that from happening, but that's a very different kettle of fish. In this case, I mean, what they're still talking about in society is no different than the sort of segregation that we were talking about in the 1930s or 1920s, 1930s of keeping blacks and whites in different schools. The fact that they're trying to segregate classes for disabilities and not provide enough resources for those disabled students to work just as well as regulars. I mean, it's the exact same problem over again. Here's another example. In British Columbia, which is one of the provinces which is the foremost leading in laws for equality for disabilities, bus drivers from Vancouver eastward in British Columbia in the BC transit system are not trained to recognize seeing eye dogs and blind people and permanent bus passes, and free bus passes for blind people because of the fact that they can't because of the fact that in a large chunk of these cases they can't work. There's half the time, wheelchairs have been kicked, even in Victoria, in some cases, wheelchairs have been kicked off buses. I actually saw an incident of this just a couple of days ago. The law actually clearly states that wheelchairs have priority over strollers, but one person with a stroller actually, one person in a wheelchair actually said, sorry, we can't help you, you gotta wait for the next bus, because there was a wheelchair, a walker on one side, which was legit, and a stroller on the other. In that case, the woman with the stroller was supposed to get off the bus, let the guy with the wheelchair go on, and she was supposed to wait for the next bus. I mean, it's it's priorities. People, strollers, wheelchairs in ascending order from least to greatest priority. Anyway, and of course, seeing eye dogs get secondary priority to wheelchairs, but there's a whole pecking order in disabilities with that. But I mean, even that sort of shit is still going on. It's minor in Victoria. I mean, it's a lot less here, but I mean, this sort of crap is. I mean, the fact that it's making the news now, this is only just the tip of the iceberg of the sort of discrimination that us fellow Aspies are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, there's still a lot of people who, who really don't even understand they'll understand that we have a disability, but they won't know enough of the disability to realize that when we do something socially inappropriate or what have you, we're not being jackasses or we're not being, mean or rude or anything in any way. We just don't know any better. Or in some cases, we don't know any better, but we've taken a look at the social system and we view it as illogical and confusing. So in some cases we don't even care anymore because of the fact of how the social system is. I mean, I've commented on this on so many different videos before about how our social system is so arbitrary. But even with that, I mean, I even know like only a few of the basics. I mean, half the subtle nuances that are out there in terms of unspoken assumptions and the like. Like I will half the time say stuff which is perfectly logical and. I'll said something completely inappropriate because I didn't even know any better. I mean, I'm an Aspie. I've gotten trained in some of this stuff now because of because of the whole critical thinking thing, and I still don't know a large chunk of what's going on out there. I mean, am I supposed to be a fucking okay, ESP scores aside, am I supposed to be like a 100% telepath or something and read everybody's mind? I mean, what the fuck? Sorry, I know that I'm making this. Through about myself now, but I mean, I'm just one of many autistics here who are facing these exact same problems over and over and over again. I mean, enough already. People, get your freaking learn about these disabilities a bit more. For those of you who are interested in Asperger's and autism, I would recommend for Asperger's, Tony Atwood's A Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome. For autism, do your research. I mean, just because someone has a disability, it makes them no less able than they could be just equally as good as you, just happen to be hyper-focused in some other area. They're just as human as you are because of the fact that, in some cases, they may be even thinking better than you are internally and just not performing outwards. I mean, for example, autistics and Aspies, we focus more so logically, making us more Homo sapiens, if you take the literal root of rational man, more so than you because of the fact you're responding more emotional based than logic. Now, I'm not saying you specifically to my subscribers or you to the individual viewer who's listening. I'm speaking you to humanity as a whole. But anyway, that's another kettle of fish. That's just an example. It's a generalization, but you get the idea. So I guess my point is, I'm sick and tired of this discrimination. The autistic kid should be allowed in church with everyone else. Learn about your disabilities.